Alright, hey everyone, my name is Ravi Nataraj and today I'll be giving you my IO video presentation of Ibsen's influences leading up to the creation of Doll's House. Before I start, I would like to stress the importance of conducting such an investigation into the influences of Ibsen as he wrote Doll's House. Understanding such influences will not only help us better understand the environment and circumstances in which he wrote Doll's House, but it will also help us understand his motive behind writing the book. Furthermore, by understanding the influences that surrounded him while he wrote Doll's House, we can also analyze the impacts of the influences on Ibsen's unique choice of character, stage setting, and the character's actions. Now let's start on a little background of his life. Ibsen was born in Skien, Norway, as seen to the right in the picture, but the picture is really modern and does not really reflect the time in which Ibsen was born. Ibsen had a relatively large family with a mother, father, three brothers, and one sister. His mother and father were Mariken Altenburg, that was his mother, and his father was Nat Ibsen. His three brothers were Nikolai Alexander Ibsen, Johann Andreas Ibsen, and Olpas Ibsen. And his sister was Hedvig Ibsen. During the very early years of his life, he was only 5 or so. Ibsen lived in the high class of the society with many powerful connections. They were quite rich due to the father's lumber business. This leads me into Ibsen's father's influence on the writing of Doll's House. Unfortunately, his father's greed caused a grave mistake, and the lumber business went bankrupt, and the father could no longer support the family. Their family lost respect and powerful connections and finally were forced to move to a country house. Ibsen was forced to fend for his own now as he developed and faced many hardships financially and couldn't support himself and get into a good college. He later made a living through composing plays and poems. We can see the father's influence on Ibsen and his actions only have created hardships for Ibsen. Furthermore, throughout his plays, this theme of money and debt and going through hardships appears in many of his plays and Doll's House. Next, moving on, during these times of hardships for Ibsen, let's also talk about women's roles in society in the early 1800s. Women were often simply seen as incapable, unfit for any kind of strenuous activities. They could not enter into any sort of agreements, have debts, or control their own money. Essentially, they had no rights in society. Before marriage, they were under the protection of their father, and after marriage, they were under the protection of their husband. Their only role in life was to provide for the children and perform household activities. During this time, Norway was under Victorian rule, and often the Victorian rule influenced the way of the society in Norway at that time, thereby influencing Ibsen. Even in a Victorian household, the wife had no rights and had to obey the husband. In Doll's House, Nora is portrayed as the perfect Victorian wife with 3 children. To the right in the picture, a Victorian family with 3 children is just like Nora's family. Ibsen clearly is against the Victorian structure of a family and uses Doll's House as a means to criticize this family structure. One such woman in the society that's had a great influence on him is his mother. His mother made a portion of her living by painting realistic paintings. Since his mother took care of the children, his mother influenced Ibsen a lot. While growing up, Ibsen often sympathized with his mother's situation and powerlessness in the society, which led him to take a feminist aspect in his plays, specifically Doll's House. Furthermore, his mother's realistic painting led him to start liking the arts from a young age, and realism helped him portray things as they are, often seen in his descriptive stage setting, helping the reader build a mental image of the play itself. Later in his life, as new laws were passed, it allowed for women to get more rights. Here we see the changing roles of the women in society in the late 1800s. The first feminist movement was started by Gina Krog, in an attempt to secure more power for women. Women wanted joint ruler status with men, essentially more power, and wanted to have a greater impact on society. As Ibsen noticed the emergence of women trying to fight for their rights, he was greatly influenced, and this is where he actually started writing Doll's House. However, before he actually started writing Doll's House, another great event influenced his life dearly. Out of all of the influences, this is by far the most important and has the greatest impact on the development of Doll's House. It was a woman named Laura Keeler. After Ibsen had written many plays and poems, he became quite bored and did not find any meaning to them anymore. He then wrote a very important play in which became the turning point in his life. This play was called Brand. The reason why it was so important because the content in his previous plays had been really flashy in order to gain attention. He changed this to a more ethical standpoint, focusing on real life issues as those seen in women in the society. After this play was published, Laura Keeler, a woman, sent him a sequel of his play called Bran's Daughters. Ibsen was inspired by her sequel and decided to make her the main character, Nora. He, in a way, portrayed her life with the struggle of women in the society in his other play, Doll's House. What's more interesting about Laura Keeler's life is that she too had an ill husband that was named Victor and forged documents to get money for his treatment, which is the same situation which Nora is in Doll's House. Laura Keeler later became a great Danish author and lived 83 years. In conclusion, there were many influences that led to the creation of Doll's House. To summarize, Ibsen's father created hardships and a money deficit, and this theme of placing importance on money is reflected in Doll's House. Ibsen's mother, a realist painter, evoked feelings of sympathy in Ibsen to women in their society and pushed Ibsen to the arts. He also makes his plays as real as possible, and as seen with the intense imagery and stage settings. The changing role of women when he was from a child into an adult inspired him to write a play to criticize the typical Victorian family structure. His play Brand marked the turning point of his plays from rather focusing on aesthetics to more ethical issues at the time, such as women's rights. And finally, the most important influential event, Laura Keeler writing a sequel to Brand called Brand's Daughters. Laura became the main character as Ibsen was inspired and took the events from her life and turned it into a play, Doll's House. Furthermore, the combination of all these influences plus the environment in which she was surrounded in created and shaped one of the most respected plays in literature, Doll's House. With that, I conclude. These are my sources, by the way. Thank you for listening.